The Silicon Valley billionaire was 3 seconds from dying when the janitor's son walked into the boardroom and said 5 words that stopped everyone cold. "Your algorithm is killing people." What happened next would prove that sometimes the brain everyone calls broken is the only one that sees clearly. David Morgan built an empire on patterns, neural networks, predictive algorithms, machine learning systems that could forecast market trends before Wall Street even woke up. His company, Apex Analytics, was worth $4 billion. His software powered everything from hospital diagnostic systems to autonomous vehicles to financial trading platforms used by half the Fortune 500. But on that Tuesday morning in Palo Alto, none of it mattered, because David Morgan was choking to death in his own conference room, and 12 of the world's smartest people had no idea what to do. The emergency started simple: a lunch meeting with investors, catered sushi from that expensive place on University Avenue. David took a bite of yellowtail, smiled at a joke about quarterly projections, and then his throat closed. Not gradually, instantly. His hands went to his neck, the smile disappeared. His face began changing colors like a traffic light stuck in malfunction. Red, then purple, then a gray that made the woman across from him scream. "Call 911, someone shouted. The CFO, former Navy medic, jumped up and started the Heimlich maneuver. 1 thrust, 2, 3. Nothing. David's eyes bulged, pupils dilating with panic. His body convulsed. "Is anyone else a doctor?" The CFO's voice cracked with desperation. The CTO had taken a wilderness medicine course. She tried. Failed. David collapsed to his knees, consciousness flickering like a dying bulb. The VP of Engineering, MIT graduate with 3 PhDs, stood frozen. The head of AI research, former Johns Hopkins surgeon, fumbled with David's collar, unable to find a pulse point through shaking hands. 7 minutes had passed. The human brain dies after 4 minutes without oxygen. That's when Marcus walked in. Marcus Williams, 17 years old, son of the night janitor who cleaned the Apex Analytics building after everyone went home. The boy who sat in the back office doing homework while his father emptied trash cans and mopped floors. The boy everyone whispered about. The one who rocked back and forth when the fluorescent lights buzzed too loud. Who counted things in patterns of 7. Who hadn't spoken his first word until he was 6 years old. Who the special education teacher said would probably never live independently. The boy with the autism diagnosis that school counselors treated like a life sentence. Marcus stood in the doorway, backpack still on his shoulders, watching 12 brilliant people fail to save one dying man. "Your algorithm is killing people," he said. Everyone turned. The CFO, still performing useless chest compressions, looked up with wild eyes. "Kid, get help. Go find security. We need—" "He's not choking," Marcus interrupted. His voice was flat, certain, without the social softening most people use in emergencies. "It's anaphylactic shock, probably shellfish allergy. You're treating the wrong problem." The former surgeon snapped. "I know anaphylaxis when I see it. This is clearly an airway obstruction." "No." Marcus walked forward, that distinctive gait that kids at school mocked, arms held close to his body, eyes fixed on David's face with an intensity that made people uncomfortable. His lips aren't blue, they're pale. That's vasodilation, not hypoxia. And look at his hands. He pointed without touching. See the hives forming? Urticaria, classic IgE-mediated response. And his breathing. Listen. Everyone went silent. Beneath the chaos, they heard it. A high-pitched wheeze. Stridor. "That's not obstruction," Marcus continued in that same flat, factual tone. "That's airway edema. His throat is swelling shut from the inside. The Heimlich maneuver can't fix that. You need epinephrine. Right now. You have maybe 90 seconds before his blood pressure drops too low to recover." The surgeon stared at him. "How do you "Does anyone have an EpiPen?" Marcus asked, already scanning the room with systematic precision. His eyes moved in a grid pattern, processing everything. "Purse, briefcase, first aid kit?" "The medical cabinet," the assistant gasped. "Down the hall, but it's locked. I don't have the—" Marcus was already moving. Not running. He didn't run. But walking with purpose. That same counting pattern he used for everything. 7 steps to the door. Turn left. 14 steps to the medical cabinet. The lock was electronic. Biometric scanner. His father had shown him once how the cleaning staff overrode it for emergencies. 5-button sequence. Marcus's fingers moved like he was playing piano, hitting the override code from muscle memory he didn't know he had. The door clicked open. Inside, bandages, aspirin, cold packs. No EpiPen. His mind raced, categorizing possibilities. But not the way other people's minds race, scattered and frantic. His brain moved like his father's computer defragging files. Systematic, thorough, pattern-seeking. Medical supplies. Alternatives to epinephrine. What else causes vasoconstriction? What else could buy time? And then he saw it. The emergency inhaler. Albuterol. Not the same as epinephrine. Not designed for anaphylaxis. But it was a beta agonist. It would open airways. Might buy them 3 minutes. Maybe 4. Marcus grabbed it and sprinted back. Not his normal gait now. Pure animal urgency overriding social programming. David was gray. Lips barely moving. The CFO had stopped compressions, was just holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. "Move," Marcus said. He dropped to his knees, shook the inhaler, and pressed it to David's lips. 1 spray. 2. 3. "Breathe," he commanded. "Your diaphragm still works. Breathe." Nothing. Marcus pressed his palm flat against David's chest, feeling for the rise and fall. He closed his eyes, filtering out the voices, the fluorescent buzz, the smell of fear sweat, everything except the data his hand was collecting. There. A flutter. "Again," Marcus said, administering another spray. "Come on. Pattern recognition. Your autonomic system knows this pattern. Breathe." David's chest hitched. Once, twice, and then he gasped. A horrible rasping sound like wind through broken pipes. But it was air. It was breath. His eyes opened, unfocused, and terrified. But open. The paramedics burst through the door at minute 11. They had the EpiPen. They had oxygen. They had everything except the crucial minutes Marcus had bought them. As they loaded David onto the stretcher, one of the EMTs looked at Marcus. "You saved his life, kid. That was fast thinking." Marcus didn't respond to the praise. He never knew how. Instead, he said, "The sushi restaurant. Someone needs to check their supplier. Cross-contamination protocol failure. This will happen again." If you want to see how Marcus's discovery changed everything at Apex Analytics and what it revealed about David's company, please hit that like button. It helps us share more stories of wire-different triumph. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Marcus. The hospital room was white. Too white. Marcus counted the ceiling tiles while his father sat beside him, trying to explain why the police wanted to talk to them. "You didn't do anything wrong," James Williams said for the 3rd time. His hands were calloused from 30 years of janitorial work, and they shook slightly as he gripped his son's shoulder. "Mr. Morgan wants to thank you." Marcus rocked slightly. "The pattern was obvious. I don't understand why no one else saw it." James smiled sadly. He'd spent 17 years explaining to teachers, therapists, and strangers that his son's brain worked differently. Not wrong. Different. Marcus had been 3 when the pediatrician first said the word. Autism. Severe, she'd called it then. Nonverbal. Repetitive behaviors. Extreme sensory sensitivities. Difficulty with social interaction and emotional regulation. The recommendation had been intensive therapy, low expectations, and acceptance that Marcus would likely need lifelong support. But James had noticed something the doctors hadn't. When Marcus finally started talking at age 6, he didn't use baby words. He used complete sentences, medical terminology. He'd memorized entire episodes of a documentary about emergency medicine, could recite drug interactions and treatment protocols with perfect accuracy. At 7, Marcus had corrected his mother's oncologist about her medication dosage. The doctor had been wrong by 50 milligrams. The correction saved her life, for 6 more months at least, until the cancer came back. After she died, it was just Marcus and James. Father working nights, son doing homework in empty offices. Both of them navigating a world that didn't have room for people like them. The teachers called Marcus difficult, said he disrupted class with his corrections, his inability to let factual errors stand. They put him in special education, not because he couldn't learn, but because he learned too much in ways they didn't know how to measure. He'd failed 9th grade social studies, not because he didn't understand history, because when the teacher said Christopher Columbus discovered America, Marcus had stood up and delivered a 15-minute lecture on the pre-Columbian population estimates, Norse exploration, and the definition of discovery. He couldn't stop, even when the teacher told him to sit down, even when the other students laughed. That's what autism meant for Marcus: truth without filter, patterns without prejudice, and an inability to pretend something was right when every neuron in his brain screamed that it was wrong. David Morgan walked into the hospital room at 7 p.m., still wearing the hospital bracelet from his own stay 3 floors down. His throat was bruised, voice rough, but his eyes were clear. "Marcus," he said. The boy didn't look up from the magazine he was reading. Medical journal, graduate level. James started to apologize. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan. He's not good with..." "Don't apologize." David pulled up a chair, sat down slowly. "Marcus, I need to ask you something. How did you know?" "Pattern recognition," Marcus said to the magazine. "Your symptoms didn't match the pattern for choking. They matched anaphylaxis, simple differential diagnosis. But 12 people with advanced degrees didn't see it. They were looking at the wrong pattern." Now Marcus did look up, made eye contact for exactly 2 seconds before his gaze skittered away. "They saw you eating, saw you grab your throat, assumed causation. But correlation isn't causation. The timing was wrong. Anaphylaxis presents within minutes of allergen exposure. You'd been eating for 12 minutes. If you were going to choke, it would have happened immediately. The delay indicated an immune response, not a mechanical obstruction." David leaned forward. "You timed how long I'd been eating?" "I time everything. It helps me understand patterns." "What else did you notice?" And that's when something changed in the room. Because Marcus, who never talked to strangers, who the school counselor said would never hold a job, who teachers treated like a problem to be managed, started talking. He talked about the lunch order he'd seen being delivered, how the sushi container had been placed directly next to the shellfish container. Cross-contamination probability high. He talked about David's body language throughout the meeting, how he'd scratched his wrist twice before the throat swelling started. Early histamine response. He talked about the room's air circulation patterns and how particles dispersed. He talked for 7 minutes straight. Not in the scattered, nervous way most people talk, but in clean, logical progressions. A through B through C, each statement building on the last. When he finished, David was staring at him with an expression James had never seen anyone use with his son before. Wonder. "Marcus," David said slowly, "how would you like a job?" James laughed. Couldn't help it. "Mr. Morgan, that's kind of you. But Marcus is still in high school. He's in special ed. And the transition program says maybe he can work part-time stocking shelves somewhere, but I don't want him to stock shelves. David's voice was stronger now, that billionaire certainty returning. I want him to audit my company. Silence. What? James whispered. David stood up, started pacing. Marcus watched him move, counting steps. 7 to the window, 7 back. Marcus said something in the boardroom, before he saved my life. He said my algorithm is killing people. David turned to face the boy. What did you mean? Marcus set down the magazine, organized it parallel to the table edge. Perfect 90-degree angle. Your diagnostic software, he said. The pattern recognition system hospitals use. It's wrong. That software has a 94% accuracy rate. It's been validated by... It's wrong, Marcus repeated. Not arguing, just stating fact. I've been reading the medical error reports. 57 cases in the last 8 months where your system missed diagnoses. The pattern is obvious. David's face went pale again. What pattern? Your algorithm looks for the most common presentation of diseases, but rare presentations trigger false negatives. The system is optimized for statistical likelihood, not diagnostic accuracy. It's killing people with atypical symptoms. The room temperature seemed to drop. Show me, David said. That was the moment everything changed. 3 days later, Marcus sat in a glass-walled conference room at Apex Analytics, surrounded by senior engineers who looked at him like he was an alien species. The head of AI research, Dr. Rebecca Foster, MIT doctorate, and 12 years of machine learning experience, pulled up the diagnostic algorithm on the massive screen. Okay, kid. Show us what you think is wrong. Marcus didn't react to the condescension in her voice. He just stared at the screen, at the cascading lines of code, the neural network architecture, the training data sets. His eyes moved in that pattern again. Grid search. Processing. There, he said after 47 seconds. Line 2, line 847. Your training data is biased. Dr. Foster zoomed in. That's the cardiovascular disease detection module. It's trained on 10,000 confirmed cases. How is that biased? Demographics. Marcus stood up, walked to the screen, touched it with one finger. Your training set is 76% male, 82% Caucasian, median age 58. But cardiovascular disease presents differently in women, differently in younger patients, differently across ethnic groups. Your algorithm learned to recognize heart attacks in middle-aged white men. It's blind, too. Everyone else. The room went silent. Dr. Foster's face changed. She pulled up the error reports Marcus had mentioned, started cross-referencing. Oh my God, she whispered. The missed diagnoses. They're almost all women under 45 or non-white patients. Marcus sat back down, resumed rocking slightly. Pattern recognition. Your AI learned the wrong pattern. It's not looking for heart disease. It's looking for how heart disease appears in a specific population subset. One of the junior engineers spoke up. But we use the Mayo Clinic's database. That's the gold standard. The gold standard is biased, Marcus said simply. Medical research has historically focused on male subjects. The data reflects that bias. Your algorithm learned it. Now it's perpetuating it. David Morgan, watching from the back of the room, felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He was witnessing genius. Not the kind they taught at Stanford, not the kind that came with degrees and credentials, but the pure, unfiltered kind that saw truth without the interference of social expectations or conventional wisdom. How do we fix it? David asked. Marcus turned to him. 2 seconds of eye contact. Retrain it. But not just with more data, with different data. Weight the training sets to overrepresent atypical presentations. Teach the algorithm that rare doesn't mean wrong. That could take months, years. No, Marcus said. It could take 6 weeks, if you let me help. Dr. Foster laughed. Not meanly, but incredulously. "You're 17. You haven't even finished high school." "I don't have a degree," Marcus agreed, "but I have pattern recognition abilities that your entire team doesn't. That's not an insult. It's neurology. My brain is wired to see connections yours can't. That's what autism spectrum disorder means. Different processing, not less. Different." He paused, then added in that flat, factual tone. "Also, I've memorized the diagnostic criteria for 347 diseases, read 2,000 medical case studies, and spent 8,000 hours analyzing differential diagnosis patterns. So while I don't have credentials, I have expertise. They're not the same thing." The silence that followed was broken by David's slow clap. "He's hired," David said. "Full-time consultant. Whatever he needs." Dr. Foster opened her mouth to protest, saw the look on David's face, and closed it. "One condition," David added, looking at Marcus. "You have to teach us how you think, not just find the problems. Show us how to see them." Marcus considered this. "That's difficult. I don't think differently on purpose. I just think." "Then we'll learn your language instead of asking you to learn ours." For the first time since entering the room, Marcus smiled. Small, brief, but real. "Okay," he said. The next 6 weeks were unlike anything Apex Analytics had ever experienced. Marcus came to the office every day after school. His father would drop him off at 4 p.m., and Marcus would work until midnight, fueled by diet, Coke, and the kind of hyper-focus that made neurotypical people exhausted just watching. He didn't do small talk, didn't attend team meetings that weren't directly relevant, didn't participate in the social rituals that corporate culture demanded. At first, people were offended. The head of HR pulled David aside. He doesn't say good morning. He doesn't make eye contact. He corrects people constantly. The team is complaining. David's response: "The team can adapt." And slowly, they did. Dr. Foster was the first to crack the code. She noticed Marcus worked in 90-minute sprints, then needed exactly 17 minutes of silence. During those breaks, he'd pace the empty cafeteria, counting his steps, resetting whatever neural pathways had been overfired. Instead of scheduling hour-long meetings, she started scheduling focused, 40-minute work sessions with breaks built in. The junior engineers noticed Marcus couldn't handle the fluorescent lights in the main office. The buzzing triggered sensory overload, made him unable to concentrate. They bought him a desk lamp, let him work in a smaller, dimmer room. The project manager learned to communicate with him via written notes instead of verbal instructions. Marcus processed written information faster, more accurately. No ambiguity, no subtext to decode. And as the team adapted to Marcus, something remarkable happened. They got better. The engineers started questioning their assumptions, started looking for biases in their data, started thinking about who their algorithms might be failing. Marcus didn't just find bugs in the code. He found bugs in their thinking. "Why do you train facial recognition software on smiling faces?" he asked one day. "Because that's how we identify people," someone answered. "No. That's how you identify happy, neurotypical people. People with autism often don't smile socially. People with facial paralysis can't. Your algorithm would fail to identify millions of people because you assumed everyone performs emotion the same way. They rebuilt it. Why does your hiring algorithm prioritize candidates with continuous work history? Because that shows reliability. No, it shows privilege. People who took time off for medical issues, caregiving, disability, they're automatically filtered out. Your algorithm isn't finding the best candidates. It's finding the most privileged ones. They rebuilt it. Why does your autonomous vehicle code assume pedestrians will make eye contact with the car before crossing? Because that's basic safety behavior. Not for everyone. Blind people can't make eye contact. Autistic people might not. Your car would hit them because you coded neurotypical behavior as universal. They rebuilt it. Week by week, Marcus was rewriting not just their algorithms, but their worldview. And the diagnostic software, the one that had missed 57 deadly cases, was transforming. Marcus identified 127 distinct bias patterns in the original code. Tuarf created new training protocols that weighted rare presentations equally with common ones. He designed testing scenarios that specifically looked for edge cases. But the real breakthrough came during week 5. Marcus was working late, alone in the small office they'd given him. The cleaning crew had come through. His father was working a different building that night, and the silence was perfect. Just the hum of computers and the clicking of his keyboard. He was running a simulation, testing the new algorithm against historical cases, watching the accuracy rates climb. And then he saw something that made him stop, a pattern in the patterns. He pulled up his secondary monitor, started pulling data from a different system entirely. Not medical records, financial records, insurance claims, treatment authorizations. His fingers moved faster. That hyper-focus state where hours passed like minutes. The sun was rising when Dr. Foster found him, still sitting in the same position, surrounded by 15 monitors worth of data visualization. "Marcus, did you sleep here?" He didn't answer, just pointed at the central screen. "The diagnostic errors aren't random," he said. "They're profitable." Dr. Foster moved closer, squinting at the data. "What do you mean?" "Look at the pattern. The 57 cases the algorithm missed? They're all expensive diagnoses, rare cancers requiring specialized treatment, autoimmune diseases needing long-term care, genetic disorders with no quick fixes." His voice was still flat, but there was something underneath it now. Anger. "The algorithm isn't just biased by demographics, it's biased by cost." She stared at him. "That's not possible. We didn't code for financial considerations. You didn't have to." Marcus pulled up the training data source. "The hospital systems that provided your data use insurance authorization algorithms. They pre-screen for cost-effectiveness before diagnosis. That bias was already in the data. Your AI learned it. Now it's steering doctors away from expensive diagnoses." The implications hit her like a physical force. "It's not just failing to diagnose," Marcus continued. "It's systematically underdiagnosing conditions that cost money to treat. The people who died didn't just have atypical symptoms. They had expensive diseases. The algorithm learned that those diagnoses cause problems for hospitals, so it stopped seeing them." Dr. Foster sat down heavily. "We need to tell David." "I already did." David's voice came from the doorway. He looked like he'd been awake all night, too. "I've been on the phone with our legal team and the FDA. Marcus is right, and we have a massive problem." The meeting that followed involved lawyers, ethicists, engineers, and the board of directors. Marcus sat at the end of the table, present but not participating in the arguing. He'd already said what needed to be said. Now the neurotypical people needed time to process, to react, to feel the social and financial implications. He waited. Finally, the general counsel spoke. "If we disclose this publicly, we're looking at lawsuits from every family who lost someone to a missed diagnosis. We could be bankrupt in a year." "And if we don't disclose it," David said quietly, "more people die." Silence. "There's a third option," Marcus said. Everyone turned. "Fix it. Publicly. Release the new algorithm for free. Open source it. Let every hospital system audit their AI for the same biases. Turn this from a liability into leadership." The CFO shook his head. "That's corporate suicide. We'd be admitting fault." "You're already at fault," Marcus replied, with that devastating autistic honesty. "You just haven't admitted it yet. The question is whether you want to be the company that hid a lethal algorithm or the company that exposed and fixed a systemic problem in medical AI." David looked at him for a long moment, then turned to the board. "Marcus is right. We're making this public. Today." The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 1:45, Marcus sat in a bathroom stall, rocking back and forth, hands over his ears, trying to manage the sensory overload of camera flashes and voices, and the wrongness of the suit they'd made him wear. His father found him there. "You don't have to do this," James said gently. "David can make the announcement alone." "No." Marcus stood up, straightened the tie that felt like a noose. "I have to explain the pattern. They won't understand otherwise." "They might not understand anyway." Marcus met his father's eyes for 3 seconds. "Then I'll teach them." He walked onto that stage with his father beside him, faced 200 journalists and cameras, and did something he'd never been able to do in 17 years of school presentations. He spoke truth without apology. "My name is Marcus Williams. I have autism spectrum disorder. That means my brain processes patterns differently than yours. Not worse. Differently. For most of my life, people have treated that difference as a disability, as something to fix or hide or apologize for." His voice was steady, flat, but the words cut through the murmur of the crowd. "But my different brain is the only reason we discovered that Apex Analytics diagnostic software was systematically missing expensive diagnoses. A neurotypical brain, trained by neurotypical systems, built an algorithm that reflected neurotypical biases. It took someone wired different to see it." He pulled up the slide showing the 57 cases. 57 faces. "These people died because our medical AI learned to prioritize profit over diagnosis. It learned from data that was already biased. It amplified that bias. And it killed them." The room was dead silent now. "Apex Analytics is releasing a completely redesigned diagnostic system today. Free. Open source. And we're funding a new initiative to audit every major medical AI in the country for similar biases." He paused, looked directly into the camera. "But the real solution isn't better AI, it's better training data. And better training data comes from including voices that medical systems have historically ignored. Disabled voices, non-white voices, poor voices, atypical voices, people like me." He stepped back from the microphone. David moved forward to handle the questions. But the headlines the next day weren't about the CEO. They were about the autistic teenager who'd saved an industry from itself. The lawsuits came anyway. 47 families, 800 million in claims. But something strange happened. As the story spread, as other companies began auditing their AI systems, they found the same patterns. Biased training data, algorithms that learned to discriminate, systems that looked objective but were built on subjective, flawed assumptions. And they all came to Apex Analytics for help. Marcus's consulting firm, because yes, David helped him start his own company, became the most sought-after AI auditing service in the world. Not despite his autism. Because of it. He built a team of other neurodivergent analysts, people with autism, ADHD, OCD, dyslexia, brains that worked differently, that saw patterns others missed, that questioned assumptions others accepted. They called themselves pattern breakers. Within 2 years, they'd audited 200 major AI systems, found biases in criminal sentencing algorithms that targeted minorities, employment screening tools that filtered out disabled candidates, loan approval systems that discriminated against women, and they fixed them. All of them. Dr. Foster became Marcus's chief technology officer. She told a reporter, "I spent 12 years at MIT learning to build AI. Marcus taught me in 6 weeks that I'd been building my own blind spots into every algorithm. His autism isn't a disability, it's a debugger for human bias." The special education teacher who'd said Marcus would never live independently sent him a letter, an apology. He didn't read it. His father did, cried, and never told Marcus what it said. On Marcus's 20th birthday, David Morgan offered him a full partnership in Apex Analytics. They were sitting in that same conference room where Marcus had first identified the algorithm's flaws. 3 years had passed. The company had rebuilt itself around inclusive AI design. Their new motto, suggested by Marcus: different perspectives, better patterns. You changed everything, David said. Not just the company, the industry. You proved that neurodiversity isn't something to accommodate. It's something to celebrate, a competitive advantage. Marcus rocked slightly in his chair, processing. I didn't do anything special. I just saw what was there. Exactly. You saw what no one else could. Because your brain doesn't filter reality through social expectations. You see truth, raw data, patterns without prejudice. That's just autism, Marcus said. That's just genius, David replied. The partnership was finalized. Marcus Williams, diagnosed as severely autistic at age 3, told he'd probably never work a normal job, became one of the youngest partners in Silicon Valley history. But the story doesn't end there. Because Pattern Breakers kept growing, not just as a company, but as a movement. They started a training program for neurodivergent analysts, partnered with schools that had written off kids like Marcus, showed companies that people who failed standardized tests could excel at pattern recognition that saved lives. They developed new interview protocols that didn't require eye contact or small talk, work environments that accommodated sensory needs, communication systems that valued clarity over social performance. And slowly, the definition of qualified began to change. The engineer who stimmed during meetings but caught coding errors no one else saw. The analyst who couldn't do presentations but wrote reports that restructured entire systems. The designer who went non-verbal under stress but created interfaces that worked for everyone, not just the neurotypical majority. They were all hired, all valued, all thriving. Marcus's father, James, retired from janitorial work at 53, not because he had to, because Marcus bought him a house. Nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood where the lights didn't buzz and the doors didn't slam. You didn't have to do this, James said, eyes wet. Yes, I did, Marcus replied. You never treated my brain like it was broken. You taught me it was just different. Everything I am is because you saw patterns when everyone else saw problems. They stood in the empty living room, father and son, both crying in their own ways. I'm proud of you, James whispered. Marcus hugged him, brief, tight, then pulled away because extended physical contact was still hard. I know, he said. And he did. 5 years after that press conference, Marcus was invited to speak at the graduation ceremony for Stanford Medical School, the same institution that had rejected his college application 3 times. Not a good fit, they'd said. Lacks the interpersonal skills necessary for medical practice. He stood at that podium, looking at 300 future doctors, and told them, I failed 9th grade social studies. I've never made eye contact for more than 3 seconds. I can't read facial expressions. By every traditional measure of social intelligence, I should have failed. He paused. But I've saved more lives than most of you will save in your entire careers. Not because I'm a doctor, but because I see patterns you've been trained not to see. He pulled up a slide, a brain scan, his brain scan. This is what autism looks like in an fMRI. See those hyper-connected neural networks? That's not a disorder. That's a different operating system. It processes information faster in some areas, slower in others. It sees connections that typical brains filter out as noise. Another slide. The 57 faces. These people died because the medical system was built by and for neurotypical brains. Their symptoms didn't fit the pattern, so they were dismissed, ignored, killed by a system that couldn't see beyond its own architecture. He looked up. When you graduate today, You're going to treat patients who don't fit your textbooks, who present symptoms in ways you weren't taught, who communicate differently, who think differently, who are wired different. His voice strengthened. And you're going to have a choice. You can dismiss them as difficult, as non-compliant, as atypical, or you can learn their language, adapt your patterns, recognize that different doesn't mean wrong. He stepped back. I'm not asking you to accommodate people like me. I'm telling you we might save your life someday, if you're smart enough to listen. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes, but Marcus didn't hear it. He'd already left the stage, overwhelmed by the noise, retreating to the quiet room they'd prepared for him. His father found him there, rocking, hands over ears, regulating. "You okay?" James asked. Marcus nodded, breathed, counted to 7. "I told them," he said. "I told them the pattern." "You did good, son." "I know." Marcus smiled that small, brief smile. They listened. That's different. And it was. The world was changing. Slowly. Imperfectly. But changing. Because a boy who couldn't make eye contact taught people to see differently. Because a brain called broken fixed what brilliant minds had built wrong. Because sometimes the genius everyone calls disabled is the only one who sees clearly enough to heal a system that's been sick all along. Today, Pattern Breakers employs over 200 neurodivergent analysts. They've audited AI systems in healthcare, criminal justice, education, and finance. They've identified biases that have affected millions of lives. Marcus still rocks when he's overwhelmed, still counts in patterns of 7, still can't do small talk or read facial expressions. But he can see truth that others miss. And in a world built on hidden biases and unquestioned patterns, that's not a disability. That's a superpower. The last time I spoke with Marcus, yes, I met him for this story. I asked what he wanted people to understand about autism. He thought for 7 seconds. Literal, counted seconds. Then he said, "Stop trying to fix us. Start learning from us. We see the world you built, all of it, including the parts you can't see. That's not a deficit. That's data." David Morgan was supposed to die that Tuesday morning in Palo Alto. He lived because someone wired different walked into the room. 57 people should still be alive. They're not. But because Marcus Williams saw a pattern no one else could see, thousands of future patients will live. Thousands of algorithms will be rebuilt. Thousands of neurodivergent people will be hired, valued, celebrated for seeing what others can't. That's not accommodation. That's evolution. The human brain comes in infinite variations. Some see colors others don't. Some hear frequencies others can't detect. Some process patterns that seem like chaos to everyone else. We call these differences disorders. Marcus calls them different operating systems. And he's right. Because the genius they called broken just debugged an industry. The boy, they said, would never work independently, just restructured how we build intelligence. The brain they tried to fix just fixed our broken systems. That's what wired different means. Not less. Not damaged. Not wrong. Just different enough to see what we've been missing all along. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a parent with a neurodivergent child who's been told to lower their expectations. Maybe it's a teacher who has a student who thinks differently. Maybe it's someone who's been told their brain is broken when really, it's just wired for patterns no one else can see. Drop a comment telling us about the neurodivergent people in your life who've changed how you see the world. Let's celebrate different minds. Because the next Marcus Williams might be in a special education classroom right now, being told what they can't do, instead of being given the chance to show us what they can see that we can't. Subscribe for more stories of wired different triumph, because this world needs every kind of brain, especially the ones that see patterns we've been trained to ignore.